Figure it out yourself. Those words echoed in his head, clashing like a bitter refrain, while the red taillights of the car and the malicious laughter of his wife and her sisters vanished into the cold October mist. Robert had just been dumped at a deserted gas station, hundreds of miles from home, his heart pierced by the icy realization of betrayal. Welcome to the Price of Betrayal channel. Today, you will hear the story of Robert, a man whose own wife left him to his fate for the cruel amusement of her sisters. It is a story of betrayal, of loneliness amidst the autumn wasteland, and of how even those closest to us can turn out to be our fiercest enemies. This tale will make you contemplate the true price of trust. Subscribe to the channel and like this video so you don't miss new, intense stories of revenge and reckoning. It all began when my wife Julia slammed on the gas and left me alone in the middle of a bleak gas station parking lot in Billings, New Jersey, 200 miles from our home in another corner of the state. In the back seat, her sisters, Jessica and Vanessa, were howling with malicious laughter as if they had just witnessed the funniest performance of their lives. My name is Robert. I am 34 years old. I work for a construction company called North Peak Engineering. Julia and I had been married for 8 years. We had driven there for her cousin's wedding, planning to spend time as a group of 4, myself, Julia, and her sisters, all in her car, sharing the costs of gas and the hotel. But even on the way there, I felt a cold shadow falling over our trip. Julia was constantly exchanging sly glances with her sisters in the rearview mirror, whispering to them, naively thinking I couldn't hear a thing. When I asked what was happening, she would only smile and reply, "Nothing, honey, just sister stuff." I should have listened to that anxious voice inside me screaming of trouble. We stopped to fuel up about an hour away from Billings, New Jersey. I went into the store for coffee and to use the restroom. When I returned, they were already in the car with the engine running. Julia, with a bizarre, almost predatory smile, lowered the window. "Get in the car, Julia," I said, approaching the passenger door. "Actually," she drawled, "we've been thinking, and we decided you need a lesson in independence. What are you talking about?" My eyebrows knit together in confusion and a premonition of something terrible. Jessica leaned forward from the back seat. "You're always clinging to Julia like a lost puppy afraid to be alone. We decided this would be good for you." Vanessa added, "A little adventure won't hurt you." I gripped a set of keys in my hand, but a wave of ice washed over me. These were the house keys, not the car keys. My pickup truck was peacefully slumbering at home in New Jersey. "This isn't funny. Stop this cruel circus," I said. Julia's smile twisted into a malicious grimace. "It's not a joke. It's a prank. You're always so serious, Robert. Learn to laugh once in a while. Figure it out yourself," she shouted, and floored the gas. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching the red lights of their car, like the last sparks of hope, fade into the distance along the deserted Highway 2, swallowed by the autumn darkness. In my pocket were only my wallet and phone, while in my head, like a cold fog, a gruesome realization expanded. My wife and her sisters had just abandoned me to my fate in the middle of a void where only the wind and the vast sky reigned. The October wind pierced to the bone through my thin jacket, and the air already held the sharp scent of the promised first snow. I called Julia. Instant voicemail. I dialed Jessica. The same. Vanessa had blocked me months ago after some argument I couldn't even remember. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a stupid prank that would end in an hour. This was something far worse, and it clearly showed what they truly thought of me. Nothing good. I went back into the store and asked the cashier how much a bus ticket to New Jersey cost. "Buses don't run here," he replied. "The Greyhound only stops in Billings, about 40 miles from here." I met Julia 9 years ago on a construction site. She worked as an environmental consultant on a commercial project for my crew. Smart, with a sparkling sense of humor, she knew how to look at me in a way that made it feel like we were the only 2 people in the room. Her sisters were entirely different. That same spark of warmth never ignited in their eyes. Jessica, 2 years older, worked in marketing at a tech company, and always had an opinion on everything. Vanessa was 28, she was still finding herself, but she had no problems with her attitude. From the beginning, they treated me as if I were brazenly stealing their most precious possession, their sister. At family dinners, they would exchange jokes whose meanings were a total mystery to me, leaving me with a sense of absolute alienation. On trips, they planned activities, intentionally excluding me from any plans. "They're just looking out for me," Julia would say whenever I tried to discuss it. "They'll get used to it over time," she repeated. But it never happened. On the contrary, their hostility only grew. After the wedding, everything got worse, as if I had become their target. Jessica egged Julia on, saying I was preventing her from traveling and taking risks, keeping her in a golden cage. Vanessa rolled her eyes at the sky every time I offered my help, whether it was changing a tire or doing a small repair. Not everything in life requires male involvement, she loved to say. I began to notice that Julia was constantly texting her sisters even when it was just the two of us, and she could cancel our shared plans at any moment due to their sudden crises, leaving me alone with my disappointment. Crisis. Last year, Julia forgot their anniversary while helping one of her sisters move. The year before, she missed Robert's birthday because of her other sister's boyfriend troubles. Family above all, she would repeat. And Robert respected that. Fides. Warnings had echoed throughout this trip as well. Julia's sisters insisted Robert leave his pickup at home and booked the hotel at this trip as Hrull, and booked the hotel only in Julia's name. Remember how fun you used to be? One of them asked on the road before Robert became a boring homebody. He joked it off, but inside, it was unbearably unpleasant. Robert worked 60 hours a week to provide everything they needed, fixed the house, planned trips, and remembered all the important dates. He believed this was what a true, good husband was. But standing at the gas station, watching the fiery sunset spill over the New Jersey hills, Robert finally realized his horrific mistake. It wasn't about what it meant to be a man, but about whom he had married. The cashier at the gas station, with a sympathetic nod, let Robert use the landline. With trembling fingers, he called a taxi to the nearest town, Trenton, to reach the bus station. The ride cost $60, money Robert barely had, but he desperately needed to get on that bus. The journey to Philadelphia took 14 hours. 14 long hours Robert spent in an uncomfortable seat, every minute of which was filled with bitter thoughts about their marriage and the woman for whom he had tried his hardest for 8 years. He constantly checked his phone, expecting an apology or a panicked call, but there was nothing. Near midnight, somewhere near Lancaster, Pennsylvania, it dawned on Robert. This wasn't about teaching him independence or helping him relax. No, this was about deep, soul-crushing humiliation. This story showed him exactly what place he occupied in their tight, poisoned, sisterly union. Robert recalled every instance he had yielded when they wanted to change plans. He remembered staying silent when they made biting jokes at his expense, apologizing for things he wasn't guilty of just to avoid conflict. The worst part wasn't being abandoned. The worst part was realizing this plan had likely been festering in their sick minds for weeks, if not months. He imagined them sitting in one of the sisters' apartments, concocting their devious plan, laughing hysterically at how naive and unsuspecting Robert was. When the bus finally arrived in Philadelphia at 8 in the morning, Robert had already made his decision. He took a taxi home, hoping to see Julia's car, but the driveway was empty. Inside the house, everything was exactly as they had left it Friday morning, like a frozen frame from a movie. Robert sat at the kitchen table, called work, and feeling an unbearable weight in his chest, said he was sick. And then he did something he had never done before. He began going through Julia's things, not out of jealousy or suspicion of infidelity, but out of a desperate need to understand who had he lived with for these 8 years of his life. Her laptop was password protected, but Julia wasn't always careful enough to close all her tabs. In one browser, Robert found a messenger correspondence with her sisters from the last few months, screenshots of their private messages that she had forwarded to her sisters, accompanied by malicious emojis. Horrible photos of Robert sleeping with captions like, unconscious as usual, zero reaction to surroundings. But the true blow that shattered his consciousness was the correspondence dedicated to this trip to New Jersey. One of Julia's sisters wrote, "We should drop him somewhere and see how long it takes him to get home on his own." Another sister maliciously added, "Oh my God, he depends on Julia for everything. Julia, you're terrible, but this would be so funny." They discussed every detail. The gas station stop, the talk about independence, even a backup plan in case Robert arrived before them. "He'll probably just call his mom," one of them wrote, adding disdainfully, "Big baby." Robert closed the laptop and sat in absolute silence for a long time, the only sound being his own rapid breathing. Then he stood up, packed one bag, and walked out of the house without leaving a note, without turning off the lights, and without even locking the door behind him. He left just as they had driven away from him, with the only difference being that Robert did not intend to return. He got into his pickup and drove to his brother Kevin's in Baltimore, Maryland. Kevin worked nights at a factory and had a spare room, which was a true lifesaver. When Robert appeared on his brother's doorstep with a travel bag and no explanation, Kevin only nodded silently, his gaze radiating understanding, and handed him a cold beer. "Planning to stay long?" he asked. "I don't know," Robert replied. My friend had never liked Julia. He didn't say it directly, but Robert saw how he would go silent in her presence and look for excuses to leave family gatherings early. Robert told him everything. The cruel prank, the correspondence, and the months of planning behind his back. "Damn it, Robert," his friend said when he finished. "You'll be better off without her. Much better." On Monday, Robert called his boss and asked for a transfer to a project in Colorado Springs. They were short on people for a hospital renovation and needed experienced specialists. The boss didn't ask unnecessary questions and said Robert could start as early as Wednesday. On Tuesday afternoon, Robert's phone rang. It was Julia. Robert didn't answer but listened to the voicemail. "Robert, where are you? I'm back home and you're gone. This isn't like you. Call me back, we need to talk." No apology, no admission of guilt. Only deep surprise that Robert dared to vanish. His heart tightened with bitterness, but he blocked her number. An hour later, one of her sisters called. Robert blocked her too. Then the other sister, and her as well. But they were cunning. They started calling from other numbers, including Julia's work phone. The messages were the same, cold and dismissive. "You're overreacting. It was just a joke. Come back. We need to discuss everything." On Thursday, my friend returned from his shift with a tense face. "Your wife is here," he said, sitting in a car across from the house. Robert looked out the window and saw Julia's dark blue sedan. She noticed him and stepped out, heading for the entrance. Robert met her in the lobby, preventing her from coming up. "Robert, thank God," she said, reaching for him. "I was so worried." Robert stepped back, not letting her even touch him. "What do you want, Julia?" he asked. "I want you to come home. I want to talk like adults." "Talk about what? About how you dumped me hundreds of miles from home? About how you and your sister spent months preparing this?" For a second, the mask of the caring wife vanished, and Robert saw unhidden irritation. As if he were the one at fault, not her. "It was a joke, Robert. You were acting like we committed a crime. You left me alone, laughed about it, and planned it in advance because you needed it," Robert replied. "You're too dependent, too clingy. We thought if you solved the problem yourself for once, maybe you'd grow up." The lobby was quiet, only the old lamps buzzing overhead, casting long shadows. Robert looked at the woman he had lived with for 8 years and realized with haunting clarity that he didn't know her at all. "I'm not coming back," he said firmly. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just leave because your feelings were hurt." "Yes, I can," Robert replied, giving her a cold look that cut sharper than glass. He turned and walked to the elevator. She followed, hurriedly uttering something about promises, threats, and nonsensical excuses. But Robert stopped listening. As the elevator doors slowly closed, she was still talking, her voice muffled as if cut off from the world. On Friday morning, Robert received a message from an unknown number. "This is one of Julia's sisters. Julia isn't very upset. You need to fix this." Robert showed the text to his friend over a cup of coffee. "Change your number," he advised. And so Robert did. 3 weeks later, Robert had fully settled into his new rhythm. By day, he worked on the hospital renovation in Colorado Springs. On weekends, he helped his friend with his truck, enjoying the physical labor. He was learning to make decisions for himself, relying only on his own judgment. He found a small apartment on the south side of Colorado Springs. It was nothing special, but it was his place. No shared discussions about furniture or wall colors, no compromises on what to watch or cook. For the first time in years, Robert felt like himself again, free and independent. Then his mother called. "Robert, dear, Julia hasn't come by," she said, her voice trembling with inexplicable anxiety. Robert had been avoiding his parents' calls, not ready to discuss the split, but apparently Julia had no such issues. "And what did she tell you?" Robert asked, trying to remain calm. "That you're having some kind of nervous breakdown? That you disappeared after a family trip and aren't answering calls?" His mother's voice held genuine alarm. She had always loved Julia, considering her the perfect wife for Robert, reliable and responsible. "No, Mother. It's not a breakdown. We just have problems, the kind that can no longer be solved." Robert didn't want to get into the details. He wasn't going to explain the texts, the planned prank, or the months of hidden malice that led to that October stop in Montana. To an outsider, it might look petty, as if he were blowing things out of proportion over a meaningless joke. "I'll call you back later, Mom. I need to think." But hanging up, Robert realized Julia was still in the game. He felt like a puppet whose strings were still held by her cruel hand. She continued to control the situation, painting him as an unstable person who abandoned his family for no reason. The following weekend, Robert, feeling a heavy burden on his soul, drove to Denver, not to their shared home, but to his old friend Marcus, who had been at his wedding. "I heard you and Julia split up," Marcus said, opening the door with genuine sadness on his face. "Sorry to hear it. What happened?" "What did you hear?" Robert asked, feeling anger rise in his throat again. "Just that you left after some argument." She looked very upset. There it was, Julia's version, where Robert was the bad, impulsive husband who dumped his wife. Under the soft evening light in Marcus's backyard, they sat with bottles of cold beer. Robert told everything from start to finish, pouring out months of pain and disappointment. "That's rough," Marcus shook his head. Why would she do that? I think she wanted me gone, but not forever. She liked having power, the ability to hurt me and show that I was nothing to her. Marcus went silent, then said, You know what I remember about your wedding? At the banquet, you were talking to my guys. Everything was going fine, but as soon as you laughed or looked happy, Julia would immediately come over and lead you away under some pretext. Robert remembered her dragging him to relatives or photographers. Back then, he thought she just wanted to be a good hostess. Maybe, Robert replied, or maybe she didn't like me having fun without her. That evening, he drove past their house. Julia's car was in the yard. The living room light was on. He saw her shadow gliding across the curtains like a ghost of the past. Robert didn't stop. He didn't knock. He just drove past, feeling a strange lightness. And that's when Robert realized he wasn't just running away from a bad marriage. He was moving towards something better. In the following months, Robert began doing what he should have done years ago. He opened his own bank account, transferred his share of the savings, and found a divorce lawyer named Patricia Coleman. She listened to his story without judgment, with professional composure. Is there evidence of harassment? Patricia asked. Robert showed her the list of blocked numbers, screenshots of messages from her accomplices, and records of the relentless calls to his workplace. And you say she went to your parents? Yes. She told them I was having a nervous breakdown. Patricia took notes. We can use this. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, but these things matter in ancillary issues. That same day, Robert signed the papers, feeling a massive weight lift from his shoulders. Patricia would handle the filing and the formal notification to Julia. One more important thing, she said as he left, looking at Robert with a stern but sympathetic gaze. Do not answer calls, messages, or visits. Any word from you could be used to paint you as unstable or vengeful. If Julia shows up at your work, document it and call the police if necessary. By then, the renovation project was going excellently. Robert was promoted to foreman, managing 5 workers. The salary was stable, bringing long-awaited financial independence. Peace reigned at work. No one dared interfere in his personal life as long as he performed his duties. Robert started taking evening classes at a local college in business management, something he had been interested in for a long time, but never found the time for. Now that Julia and her sisters no longer occupied all his thoughts and energy, Robert had space. In his soul, there was finally infinite space. For dreams, for his own decisions, for a life where he was the master, not just a reflection of someone else's expectations. 2 months passed since Robert filed for divorce. Kevin called him at work. Your lawyer called, says it's important. That same day, Robert went to Patricia's office. On her desk was a stack of papers, and her eyes, as always, radiated calm confidence and a hidden satisfaction of victory. Your wife hasn't been wasting time, she began. She hired her own lawyer. They are trying to claim abandonment. They claimed Robert left without warning and refused family therapy. The abandonment charge was far-fetched, but they insisted his departure was intentional and malicious, seeking to contest the division of property. A cold spasm gripped Robert's stomach. Even now, after everything, Julia was still trying to control the narrative. Well, here's an interesting part, Patricia continued, her voice like a sharpened blade. I hired a private investigator. Your wife, Julia, was telling people you became aggressive and she had to escape. It's a lie, I know it, and I have irrefutable proof. The investigator found social media posts from that very weekend. Photos of Julia and her sisters at a bar in Billings, Montana, with captions like, Girls and Freedom? In the printouts, Robert saw them with raised glasses and wide smiles, exactly at 11 o'clock on the night they had left him at the gas station. This destroys their version, Patricia stated. They cannot claim they were afraid of you, Robert, while simultaneously celebrating your absence. In one of the photos, one of the sisters was wearing a Denver Broncos cap that belonged to Robert, which he had left in the car when he went for coffee. And that's not all, Patricia added. The investigator also found the correspondence in their group chat. Julia hadn't cared much for privacy. In the new stack of printouts were screenshots of the same messages Robert had seen on her laptop, plus dozens of others he hadn't found before. Months of planning, mocking his reactions, even placing bets on how long it would take before he crawled back. Tomorrow we file the response, Patricia concluded, and we'll close this matter. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in March. Robert arrived in his best suit, the same one he had married in 8 years ago. Julia sat at the other table with a sleek lawyer in an expensive suit. She had lost weight and looked tired, with shadows under her eyes. Meeting his gaze, she tried to force a smile, as if they were still on the same team. Julia's lawyer started first, painting Robert as an unstable man who abandoned his wife over a trifle, refused therapy, and decided to punish her for a harmless prank. Your Honor, he said, Mr. Robert was simply looking for an excuse to end the marriage. He used a simple misunderstanding between relatives to abandon his responsibilities. When Patricia stood up, her voice was calm, but the steel forged over years rang in every word. Your Honor, I wish to present evidence that refutes the petitioner's claims. She handed the judge the stack of screenshots, social media posts, and harassment records. Step by step, she dismantled Julia's fabricated story. These are messages between Julia and her sisters where they planned this so-called prank for several months. These are social media posts from the evening they abandoned my client where they are celebrating their success. These are records of constant calls and messages after my client requested no further contact. The judge silently reviewed the papers, as if each document were a tiny piece of truth. Julia's lawyer whispered something in her ear, but Robert saw the tension blooming on her face. Furthermore, Patricia continued, the petitioner spread false information regarding my client's mental state and character among friends and relatives. This is a clear example of manipulation and emotional pressure, not the behavior of a caring wife. When the judge looked up, his expression was neutral but decisive. Based on the evidence provided, I grant the petition for divorce. Property will be divided equally with no alimony. The court finds no evidence of family abandonment or violence by the respondent. In the hallway, Julia tried to approach Robert, but Patricia stepped firmly between them. No contact. The order is still in effect, she said sternly. Robert walked to his pickup without looking back. 3 years after that gas station in Montana, everything was finally over. The business management courses paid off. 6 months later, Robert opened his own construction firm, Thompson Contracting. Initially, they were small jobs, bathroom renovations, deck installations. The work was steady. Clients valued his punctuality and honesty. Kevin became his first employee, and later, other specialists joined the team. Our shared efforts with Brandon bore fruit, and soon we gained a reputation as contractors who never cut corners. I bought a small house on the western outskirts of New Jersey. Nothing luxurious, but with a garage for tools and a spacious yard where I could think in peace, without shared meetings about wall colors or votes on what to put in the living room. About a year after the divorce, I ran into an old acquaintance in a hardware store. "Hear about Julia?" he asked, crossing paths with me between the fastener aisles. "I haven't thought about her in months," I replied, and it was the absolute truth. Her shadow had long since stopped haunting my thoughts. "No, about her getting divorced again?" "Married a coworker 6 months after your divorce. They lasted less than a year. I took a pack of self-tapping screws and headed for the checkout. "Want to know what happened?" he shouted after me. "Not really," I answered without even turning around, and it was perfectly true. Julia and her sisters finally got what they deserved. One of her sisters lost her marketing job after her persistent attempts to harass me backfired on the company, causing reputational and legal issues. The other sister's attempts to spread false rumors about me turned against her. Common acquaintances pieced the facts together and realized she was flat out lying. Julia's hasty marriage and equally quick breakup severely damaged her reputation in our former circle, leaving her increasingly isolated among the very people she so desperately wanted to impress. There are lessons that can only be learned from one's own mistakes. My life after all these storms finally found its quiet harbor. A few years after the divorce, when the wounds had healed and my heart had learned to trust again, I met Emma. She was the light that dispelled the remaining darkness. Her kindness and sincerity became the foundation upon which I could build new happiness. Our wedding was quiet and filled with genuine joy, without unnecessary pomp, only with those who truly wished us well. It was the beginning of a new, bright chapter where there was room only for love, respect, and loyalty. That is the story of Robert. What do you think about it? Write in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Price of Betrayal channel. Until next time.